Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
You're 5 years old. Daughter, congratulations, Mom exclaimed, entering the living room, where at the festive table gathered all the relatives, headed by the birthday girl. In her hands she held a huge cake, on which burned 5 candles. Well, come on, my girl, make the most cherished wish and try to overnight all the candles, pronounced Daddy, hugging the girl by the shoulders. I want. She thought for a second and looked around at everyone present. I want that we never parted, loudly said the girl and almost whispered added. And also this beautiful doll that we saw in the store. This one, asked the grandmother, and, opening the closet, took out the very doll that Evelyn had recently seen in the store and squeezed her mother's ears. What a big and beautiful toy it was, and how Evelyn would like it. But then her mother had been adamant, noting that they wouldn't spend that much money on such an expensive toy. Seeing the gift, little Evelyn was confused at first. She froze in place and looked at the doll and at her grandmother. I still can't believe what is happening. Honey, you're not happy? Grandpa asked. Why are you frozen? Birthday wishes should always come true. Evelyn smiled and clapped her hands in delight. She ran up to her grandmother and held out her arms in anticipation of the gift. When the cherished doll was in her arms, she looked at her grandparents and whispered, Grandma and Grandpa, you are the best in the world. Cindy and David, next time, consult with us. Before you give such expensive gifts, are you spoiling Evelyn? And admonished the pensioners in a disgruntled voice, the mother of the birthday girl. And I don't think we should indulge a girl's every whim. But her husband's parents disagreed. Maria, who else should we spoil? Grandpa stepped in. Who knows what will happen tomorrow and how long we have left? And what's wrong with a child to be happy? Especially she is our only granddaughter, added the mother-in-law. Evelyn was used to such conversations. She paid no attention to these words because all her thoughts were already in the yard with her favorite doll. The girls would burst with envy. No one has such a thing, reflected, smiling girl. Maria sighed heavily. She had nothing to say. She lived here on a bird's license. Her mother-in-law ran the apartment. Maria had met William at a friend's party 8 years ago. The guy fell in love with her, and as they say, at first sight. At that time, Maria had a young man whom she dreamed of marrying. But only this young man had completely different priorities. As he himself told her more than once, he hadn't piled on yet. What was the point of rushing into it? Maybe we're not right for each other, he explained to her while he looked around. Actually, I'm 21. Maria insisted. It's time for a family and kids. Why procrastinate? Especially since we've been together for 2 years. But he ignored all her arguments. Maria was angry, but she was patient and waited. Suddenly, she was invited to a birthday party in a tomb. There were a lot of people at the party, and William was among them. He immediately attracted attention. The girl stood out too much from the crowd, despite the fact that he was tall, handsome, polite, and expensively dressed, which spoke of his rather financial condition. But for all that, he was very shy. But even his modesty did not prevent him from asking Maria out on a date. And on the second date, he asked her to marry him. Maria was well aware that she had no feelings for him, but she really wanted to take revenge on her ex. Therefore, without thinking, she gave her consent. And in a month and a half, the girl stood in the registry office, in white, and mind-blowing wedding dress. Everything as it should be. Then a motorcade of several cars drove them around the city, and all the girlfriends were bursting with envy. Yes, Maria, you're lucky to get a guy with money and an apartment. Yeah. Well, what are you gonna do with your parents? They're not forever. But in the center of the city, you'll live like Christ at your side, they told each other. After the ceremony, the newly wedded couple flew to the sea and a whole week enjoyed the sound of the surf and basked under the hot sun on the hot white sand. Maria was over the moon with happiness, but the euphoria quickly passed and the reality remained. Back home, they plunged headlong into everyday cares. William was at work all day long. Maria was finishing her degree in knitwear. The spouses saw each other only at breakfast and dinner when William came home. But Maria was satisfied with this state of affairs. Finishing her studies, she met every day with her girlfriends. Did they gossip in cafes or sing karaoke? She met her ex a couple times. He held the hand of his new party and pretended not to even know Maria. His indifference was a terrible blow to the girl's ego. And she vowed to herself, "In spite of you, I'll be the happiest woman in the world." The young couple lived in the center of the city in a 2-bedroom with William's parents. The apartment, of course, was not huge, but there was plenty of space. The big room was given to the young, and in the smaller one, the owners themselves organized. My mother-in-law continued to run the household, and Maria was very happy about it. "You have your whole life ahead of you to prepare and clean," Maria's mother-in-law kept saying. "Children will go quickly. All you learn to cook and wash and iron. And while there is time, enjoy life." Maria liked this life very much. After graduating from technical school with a specialty, she decided not to go anywhere and went to work as a clerk in the nearest store to the house. Paid, of course, a little, but it was enough for little girls. Weekends she went with her friends to the disco, periodically acquired. William did not say a word to her. He himself was happy to see his young wife happy and satisfied, and his friends couldn't stop admiring him. You could only dream of such a thing. They talked about William. He doesn't limit anything, doesn't reproach anything, doesn't forbid anything, doesn't yell Maria. Should you carry him in your arms? Oh no, he should thank all the gods that I met on his way. Laughed the young woman in response. Few people would agree to live with a mother-in-law and mother-in-law. "Come on, your mother-in-law is a saint," exclaimed back her friends. "On such a one only pray." "Well, then pray," parried Maria. "I'd rather live separately, but it's probably more convenient for my William." With sadness in her voice, cried the woman. A year after the marriage, Maria realized she was pregnant. William was incredibly happy. He literally carried his wife in his arms. Cindy and David were anxiously waiting for their granddaughter to be born. They worried about their daughter-in-law, did not allow her to do anything, so that she would not suddenly get tired. They controlled her diet, her sleep. Mother-in-law freed her from all the household chores, although in principle Maria and before did not help much. And she was fine with it. But still, every chance she got, she reminded me, "The apartment is not mine. What right do I have to manage and change anything?" When Evelyn was born, and Maria didn't feel very excited when you were pregnant, you thought you were ready for motherhood. And when the baby girl came into the world, she was a very annoying young mother. I didn't realize she would need so much of my attention. She took up all of my free time, and she was soul-crushing. Maria friend. Everyone said that the first year, the baby only sleeps. But that's not really the case. Not only does she wake up with the roosters and nice outside during the day, but at night she wants to play. Can you believe it? And I'm exhausted. I want to sleep too. And the figure of a girl. Look at what I look like. Instead of breasts, there's some kind of sacs. Her stomach hangs. "Maria, we don't understand. We don't understand," her friends objected. "Your mother-in-law is dusting you off. All you have to do is raise your daughter, and that's all you do." That's easy for you to say, William. He doesn't help me at all. A girl comes home from work and goes to bed. She plays with her daughter for maybe 15 minutes, and that's it. That's interesting. So you want your husband to work and take care of your daughter. And what will you do? Sleep. I don't know, but my daughter's not just mine, she's ours. That means that both of us have to take care of her. Time flew by. Evelyn grew up. She learned to play on her own and sleep longer. Maria went back to work, and she was glad she did. Every day in the mornings, she took the girl to daycare and flew to work. In the evenings, she did not hurry home. She liked to sit and gossip with her friends, drink tea, discuss the latest news. She didn't worry about the girl because she was sure that her father or grandparents would come for her. Evelyn did not reach for her mother and did not miss her unnecessarily. She loved her father madly. And about the grandparents there is nothing to say. The child simply idolized them. And those in return did not dote on his granddaughter. William also adored the girl, but because of work could not give her much time. But when in those rare free moments they went out for a walk or to have fun. Little Evelyn remembered it all for a long time and remembered at any opportunity. And recently he promised to give her a small kitten. Evelyn clapped her hands in delight, but she immediately blew it off. Mom probably won't let him, she said quietly, looking into her father's eyes. Well, let's not tell her anything yet, and we'll see. Maybe I can talk her into it, Dad promised. The day before her birthday, Evelyn and her parents went shopping for a new dress. And that's when she noticed the beautiful doll that stood on the highest shelf. While her mother tried on her cover and twirled the girl in all directions to assess how well the new outfit fit, the girl kept her eyes on the toy. If you want, you can choose another dress. Which you like the most? Smiling, offered Maria. Can I not have a dress? I'll have a doll. Of course not. Immediately the mother replied with a refusal. Look how much it costs. No toy can cost that much money. It's not gold after all. But the grandparents decided to fulfill the dream of their only granddaughter. And the girl was so happy. She had already decided to go to the street to show her friends a new doll. As suddenly froze on the threshold and listened, her attention was attracted by a quiet squeak that came from the bedroom. Putting the doll on the floor, she decided to check what the sound was. Looking into the room, the girl saw a huge box with a bow in the center. Quickly opening it, she shrieked in surprise. Inside the dolls was a tiny gray kitten. Evelyn immediately ran out of the room and threw herself around her father's neck. Are you the best daddy in the world? She whispered in his ear, simultaneously wiping away tears of joy with her small palms. Then she rushed back and pulled her pet out of the box. The girl gently cuddled him to her and closed her eyes. This is the best birthday ever, she whispered. And when Evelyn left for the yard, Maria let her emotions run wild. You could have consulted me. I understand that my opinion doesn't matter to you. One gave an expensive doll, the other brought this furry monster. The woman was offended that her gifted dress was the one the girl liked the least. She almost cried with resentment. I want to remind you that I'm raising her alone. I'm trying to raise her to be a human being. All you can do is pamper her and let all my labor go to waste. And then Cindy, Maria, came to her son's defense. Her tone was steady and calm. Can't you rejoice with us with your daughter? Instead, you're only on her birthday. What's so terrible about a child's wishes being fulfilled? Your dress is also incredibly beautiful, but you have to realize that she's only 5 years old. And at that age, she likes toys more than outfits. That's not the point. The daughter-in-law was falling apart more and more. It's just that you all try at every opportunity to point out to me that I'm a bad mother, a worthless wife and mistress. But here you are wrong. Maria calmed her mother-in-law. Just by virtue of youth and inexperience, you do not yet understand many things. But all this will come with the years. So you're saying I'm not capable of anything. Maria, stop yelling at Mom. William suddenly spoke up. We're living in their apartment with everything. They're the ones helping Evelyn and me. And you have to admit, without my parents, it would be a little difficult. Evelyn spends most of her time with them. You have no right to raise your voice to your mom. Have you ever wondered why I still live here? Maria turned to her husband. Because my husband is so comfortable with Mommy. He hasn't even tried to get his own place. Every day I hear people saying we have to wait. We have to be patient. It'll be here soon. Yeah, I've been living on your promises for years. How much longer do I have to wait? William was silent. Cindy and David watched their son with a measure of sympathy, and after a little silence, the man said, It's a shame. I wanted to give you an anniversary present, a surprise, so to speak. But I guess I'll have to give up that idea. I've got the money for the apartment. I've saved up. This weekend we can drive around and see what's available." Maria was speechless with surprise, and immediately there was no trace of resentment. She instantly cheered up, ran up to her husband, and threw herself on his neck. His parents left the room, leaving the couple alone. They were really happy for their son, that at last he would be able to buy his own place. But it was still unsettling. They understood perfectly well that Maria is not ready for an independent life, but maybe she will learn everything faster. "My father-in-law said, 'We can only believe it,'" nodded his wife. William and Maria soon bought a one-bedroom in a residential area. But the young wife was happy about that too. During the move, she only kept talking about how the girlfriends would get a place to live. But she was not happy for long. Independent life without her husband's parents was not so simple. Now Maria in the morning not only hurried with her daughter to kindergarten, but in the evenings took her away from there, because William did not have time to do it. And when she came home, she didn't go to her room to rest, but hurried to the kitchen to prepare dinner for the weekend in non-stop mode, when she had to do an incredible number of things in just 2 days. She didn't even want to remember. The woman had forgotten the last time she had gone out with her friends. Nerds were on the limit, and they scandalized her and her husband constantly, and for any reason. Maria often took it out on little Evelyn. And as a result, the girl became silent and withdrawn. Once at work, Maria's colleagues decided to organize a corporate party. Maria warned William in advance that today he had to pick up Evelyn from daycare. William agreed and left for work. In the evening, Maria's phone was ready to explode with calls. William and her mother-in-law tried to call her alternately, but Maria persistently did not pick up the phone. She realized that now she would have to go to kindergarten to pick up her daughter and disrupt her corporate event. But when an unfamiliar number popped up on her cell phone, the woman answered, "Maria, are you picking up Evelyn? The garden has been closed for half an hour already." The kindergarten teacher expressed her dissatisfaction. "I'm on my way," muttered Maria. In response, and glancing at her watch, hailed a cab. All the way she tried to call her spouse, but his phone was disconnected. After apologizing to the disgruntled kindergarten teacher and gathering her daughter quickly, she went outside. On her way home, she pushed Evelyn up every now and then, dragging her by the arm. The girl could barely keep up with her irritated mother. She heard her mother cursing at her father, calling him selfish, irresponsible, a worthless husband, and a disgusting father. And as they approached the driveway, suddenly the phone rang again. Looking at the screen, she saw that it was her mother-in-law. "What do you all want from me?" she whispered out of breath, angry at having disrupted the party. "Yes," barked the woman into the phone. "Maria's unhappy. Or an old woman. William's been hospitalized. I don't understand you at all. Can you explain what happened?" Maria asked, not hiding the irritation in her voice. "William was in a car accident." She tried to explain clearly, swallowing her tears. "He's in surgery now. I've been calling you all evening, but I couldn't get through." Maria left Evelyn with a neighbor and rushed to the hospital. The doctor met her there and informed her that William had died without regaining consciousness on the operating table. Injuries incompatible with life. They did everything they could. It took Maria a while to realize what the doctor had said. The woman looked at her husband's parents, sitting in an embrace on the couch. Cindy was roaring in her voice, and David, pale as a sheet, was clasping his grief-stricken wife. The whole week that followed was a blur. Black robes, lots of sad people, most of them strangers, and suddenly no one. Empty in the apartment, empty in Evelyn's soul, the only reminder of the past. The girl was more withdrawn than ever. She, like a shadow, wandered around the apartment, moving silently, and in her little heart settled universal sadness. But time does not stand still. Gradually, Maria came to terms with the loss. Unlike her daughter, who missed her daddy madly until now, the girl spent all her time playing with the cat that her father had once given her. The grandparents supported the granddaughter as best they could and often took her to their home together with her father. Only their care and love helped the little girl to come back to life. And when Evelyn went to school, Maria brought her suitor to the house. "Let's get acquainted." She introduced her daughter to him. "This is my daughter Evelyn. And this is Uncle Mark. He will now live with us, which means that he is now your daddy." The girls were not thrilled with their mother's new acquaintance. He was short, unshaven. He was the exact opposite of William. The man reluctantly extended his hand to the girl, but the girl responded by hiding her palm behind her back and whispering, "My daddy died." And soon Uncle Mark moved his things out. The relationship with Evelyn was not getting better. The girl did not want a strange man to live with them. And on the shelves of the father lay his things, but no one was interested in the opinion of the little girl. The mother was completely dissolved in the new relationship. She tried her best to please the gaggle, forgetting all about her daughter. Cindy and David were worried about their granddaughter. They saw how Evelyn treated her mother's roommate. They often took the girl to their house. Well, it was not as often as they would have liked. And soon Maria announced that she was pregnant and that she and Mark had decided to get married. And when Mark began to live in their apartment on the legal grounds of the spouse, then for Evelyn began an unbearable life. Stepfather constantly scolded the girl, punished for every little thing. And the mother turned a blind eye to everything, supporting the methods of education of the new husband. After a while, the family became bigger by one little man who was named Vanessa. And all the attention of Maria and Mark was riveted to her. All their free time they tried to spend together with the little girl. And when the mother needed to do something around the house, Evelyn played the role of a nanny. At such moments, Evelyn looked at the baby's tiny hands and fingers with curiosity. She talked to her and gently stroked her head, which was covered with a delicate tuft of hair instead of hair. Evelyn had no jealousy or dislike for her little sister. She believed that when Vanessa grew older, they would surely be friends. As time went on, the stepfather and stepdaughter relationship never got better. Evelyn's presence. Mako was annoyed, and he didn't even hide it. And one day, Evelyn overheard her mother and stepfather talking. "Are you out of your mind?" Maria was indignant. "Where can I put her? I propose to sell this apartment because one room for everyone is not enough. We'll buy a 2 or 3. Then the problem with your daughter will solve itself," Mark reasoned. "But that's impossible. I must get the consent of my father-in-law and mother-in-law," replied the woman. "Here are their shares after her husband's death." "Well, then we must explain to them that we're all cramped in here," Mark insisted. When they saw Colia, they were immediately able to. And a couple of days later, when Maria brought Evelyn to her grandparents to visit, she decided to talk to them about it. After listening carefully to her daughter-in-law, her mother-in-law asked, "Maria, do you know for sure that you will find a place for Evelyn in the new apartment?" "What do you mean by that?" The woman was surprised. "I'm suggesting another option." My father-in-law entered the conversation. "You're going to take out a mortgage anyway, right? So let us buy out your share, and that way everybody's happy. You get the down payment, and we get the memory of our son." Maria didn't like that offer. She planned to get the whole apartment, but on the faces of the elderly couple realized that they would not agree to more. So she nodded in agreement. Cindy and David sold their favorite dacha, where they spent a lot of time in the summer car and garage. The proceeds, it was enough to buy out Maria's share and Evelyn's share. Maria was surprised, counting the money they received. "Evelyn, this apartment will be a gift from us when the girl grows up," Cindy clarified. Mark was the most unhappy about the whole situation. "Then let your daughter stay here." The man did not stop resenting. "Otherwise, I'll take her to the army and dress her, and then she'll burst into flames and go to her apartment. And she won't even say a kind word to me. I'll be paying this mortgage for the rest of my life. And these juvenile runaways are already in and out of the apartment." "Mark, I couldn't change anything. I tried to justify myself." "Don't be mad. We'll make money. We'll pay it off quickly. What are you going to earn?" Igor started a husband in his store with our income, as if not to starve. But I want to remind you that the idea of a spacious apartment was yours. Maria smiled. Who knew that this house was not yours? Admitted her husband. If I had known, I wouldn't have been here. Mark, what are you talking about? Maria was frightened. I don't believe that you're with me only because of the apartment. No, don't worry about it. I didn't mean it like that. The man came to his senses and took his little daughter in his arms and ran up to him. He adored Vanessa. It's just that this injustice makes me angry. So one of your daughters has an apartment and the other one's broke. But Vanessa has a father. And Evelyn only got an apartment from her father, Maria parried. They ended up buying. They are two-room. One room was allocated to the parents, and the second served as a bedroom for the girls. The sisters grew up amicably. The older sister gladly took care of the younger one, and the younger one paid the older one with her love, which Evelyn lacked in her new family. Evelyn still paid no attention to her except when she needed to be scolded or punished for something. We had always been cool to Evelyn, and with the birth of her daughter, she had grown cold to her. And one day, when Evelyn was in 6th grade, the girl came home earlier than usual. Mom was at work at the time and Vanessa was at daycare. The stepfather had been staying at home for a few days. He had recently been fired from his old job and was on the lookout for a new one. Upon entering the apartment, Evelyn was struck by the woman's shoes at the door. Her mom had never seen those before. Seeing the loss, Mark became furious. "Why are you here so early?" he shouted. "Lessons are not over yet. Our teacher got sick and canceled." Evelyn excused herself for the last class, staring at the unfamiliar shoes. "And we have someone visiting." "No, they're the neighbor's shoes. She was just leaving," the stepfather replied, noticing the direction of his stepdaughter's gaze in the room. Evelyn obediently went to her room. After seeing her off, Mark went to her room. "You've got a lot of homework." Evelyn looked at her stepfather. It was the first time the man asked her about her studies for all the years of living together. "No," the girl answered. "Evelyn, you see," the man was hesitating, obviously choosing his words. "You probably do not tell your mother that the neighbor came. Otherwise, she'll just make up stuff." "What is there to make up?" The girl didn't understand. "Nothing. It's very simple. Don't tell everything." Evelyn did as Mark asked her, but it did not escape her attention that the relationship between stepfather and mother had become somewhat strained. They were often scandalized, accusing each other of every mortal sin. It was not uncommon for the girls to get into trouble if they got in the way. Evelyn stayed with her grandparents more and more often because that's where she was loved. And once, when the house was quiet after another scandal, Evelyn took a suitcase and put her things in it, told her mother, "Sile, I have no more patience for your husband. I'm tired of your constant bickering. Now I will live where I am loved and expected." Maria calmly accepted this fact, and deep down she felt relieved. At first, she didn't even ask her mother-in-law how her eldest daughter was feeling. Evelyn didn't waste any time. She tightened her studies, corrected all the bad marks, which recently became more and more. Teachers also noticed positive changes in the girl. She began to smile more often. She cheered up. And Evelyn did not even remember her mother. The only person she missed was her little sister. By graduation, Evelyn had already decided what she wanted to be in the future. And her choice was a psychologist. "Yes, I've made up my mind," she told her grandparents. "Especially since our university has a department of psychology. And I've found out, well, it's not a bad choice," supported granddaughter David. "Psychology is a serious science," agreed Cindy. But Maria, hearing about her daughter's decision, frankly laughed. "Is it a profession to work? A vest for strangers?" She expressed her opinion. "Don't you have enough problems of your own? You're digging into other people's problems. Why are you doing this?" Evelyn's mother's reaction didn't surprise her. She probably, in her heart of hearts, was prepared for the fact that her parents would not support her. After all, her mother ridiculed all her ideas from childhood and called them delusional. "Well, at least I can understand you," explained the daughter. "Why do you so much time looking into the mouth of a man who does not put you in anything? How can you love him more than your own children? How can you have the conscience to say such things?" The woman was outraged. "Mark raised you, replaced your daddy. Vanessa adores him. Everybody fights. That's how life works." "Mom, do you really mean that?" Evelyn was surprised. "He's a bum who sits on his neck all the time. He can love, but not me. And he could never replace my daddy. Your husband is a total Alfonso, a womanizer and an egomaniac. He's no match for daddy. It's your choice, and you have to live with it. And I have no right to judge you. But don't glorify him in my eyes. I'm not blind." Listening to the eldest daughter, Maria, from indignation, could not utter a word. And when she was silent, he only gritted his teeth. "How ungrateful you are." But Evelyn only smiled at that. She remembered that she had never regretted it since she had left her mother's house. But why should we? The girl was unfazed. "I am immensely grateful to my daddy, from whom I got wonderful genes. I am immensely grateful to my grandparents, who loved me and put their souls into me, taught me forgiveness, and most importantly, to appreciate what you have. I am even grateful to you for giving me life many years ago, and most importantly, for not talking me out of leaving you back in the day. I am grateful to Vanessa, who loves me and sees me as a human being, unlike you and your husband. But I have nothing to be grateful to a stranger who came to our house on the spot and did nothing to earn my trust and favor." Maria remained silent, and only with a frown at her daughter, she left the apartment. Evelyn entered the psychology program. She was very happy with her choice and graduated from the institute with a red diploma. Next, Evelyn, several other graduates, as the best students, were sent for internship in one of the centers of psychological help to people who found themselves in a difficult life situation. The girl was incredibly grateful to fate that she got such a chance. Cindy and David were proud of their granddaughter, and at the graduation decided to give her their gift. "Evelyn," her grandmother addressed her, "you know that your grandfather and I love you madly and want only one thing, for you to be happy. We are proud of you and hope that you will continue to develop in the same direction you have grown and are ready for independent life." So we decided. Grandma paused to brush away the tears that were running. "We decided to sign over your father's apartment to you." Grandpa came to the rescue. Evelyn couldn't believe everything that was happening as she stood in the very apartment where she had once been very happy. "I thought it had been sold," she admitted. "Mom had told me that they had put the money from its sale as a down payment on the apartment they were living in now." "Yes, we bought her share then," David admitted. "So that's why you're left without a car and garage." Evelyn guessed. "And we don't regret it," smiled Cindy. "You're our joy. You're all we have left, William. So please accept our gift as a token of our undying love for you." "Thank you." Through tears, Evelyn thanked them. "I love you too. You are my most dear people in this world." Soon, Evelyn moved into a new apartment. It was harder to visit her grandparents every day, but she called them every day to check on their health. Having finished her internship at the Psychological Help Center, Evelyn was offered to stay there to work. The salary, of course, is not very big, but you will get an incredible experience, said the head of the center, holding out the employment contract for her to sign. Evelyn, not thinking long, agreed. During the year, she got used to the team. But most of all, she liked to help people. After all, it was thanks to her efforts that people became happier. And from this realization, she got inexplicable pleasure. Vanessa often visited her older sister. From her, Evelyn learned news from home, although it was hard to call it news. In her mother's family, everything was the same. Mark was still out of work, but he claimed to be on the lookout for a decent job. "I've even seen him with other women a couple of times," Vanessa admitted. "I think he's cheating on Mom." "Vanessa, don't you worry about that," her sister advised her. "The parents will figure it out. It's not a big deal to pry into a couple's relationship. Believe me, It's a thankless task. Vanessa nodded in agreement. Do you mind if I crash at your place tonight? The school canceled classes for tomorrow, the little sister explained. We're going to the exhibition. No problem then, Evelyn said happily. Such evenings the sisters stayed up late. They had something tasty for dinner and talked for a long time, drinking tea with candy. Vanessa shared her secrets with her sister and asked her opinion. She asked for advice, shared her plans for life. Evelyn listened to her with pleasure. She liked that despite their different fathers and age difference, they were very close. On the day of her 25th birthday, Evelyn did not organize a lavish party, but decided to celebrate modestly with her family. All were invited, except for her stepfather. But her mother, citing indisposition, also did not come, congratulating her daughter on the phone. Vasilieva sat all evening, was not herself, did not answer questions, all the time translating the topic of conversation. We'll marry you off to a reliable man, then you can die with peace of mind, David said. Grandpa, what are you talking about? His granddaughter stopped him. You have great-grandchildren to nurse. God willing. God willing, Cindy whispered softly. But fate had its own plans for her. 6 months later, her grandfather died of a heart attack, and her grandmother outlived her husband by only 1 year. But before she died, she made a will for Evelyn. To Evelyn's surprise, Maria showed up at her mother-in-law's funeral. In all these years, they had not spoken to each other. She hadn't been to her grandfather's funeral either. And this is a surprise. I'm glad you're here, thanked her eldest daughter. How could I leave you at a time like this? Replied the mother. And here everything is the same, she said, looking around. The wallpaper has just been changed, and the furniture is still the same. Mom, what are you talking about? You couldn't believe your ears, could you, Evelyn? The same thing. Mother explained with a shrug. It's been so many years since your father and I left this apartment, and it feels like yesterday. You could change the furniture. I don't think this is the time to discuss it, Evelyn said. And I want to remind you that my grandparents took care of me, fed and clothed me. And you cut me out of your life. As soon as the front door slammed behind me, oh, don't push it, Maria waved me off. I was always thinking about you, but I realized that you'd be better off here. A month later, her mother came to Evelyn's house to have tea and cake, which surprised the eldest daughter incredibly. What a surprise. Evelyn couldn't help pouring the tea. Did something happen? Maria asked her nonchalantly. I'm your mother, after all. Can't I just visit my own daughter? No, of course you can. It's just strange why the thought never occurred to you in the past few years. She admitted it, but it still feels good. Maria silently looked around, as if in between asked, What will you do with the apartment? Nothing, noble. I'll move here. You're alone. Why do you need a 2-room apartment? Well, first of all, it's not just an apartment for me, Evelyn explained. This is my home. It's where I grew up, where I was happy. And 2, it's in the center of town. It's a 5-minute walk to work. And after a little silence, her mother asked again, And 1 room, it will be empty. No, Evelyn assured her. I'll rent it out. The mother's face showed that she was not satisfied with her eldest daughter's plans. Soon, Evelyn renovated the 1-bedroom apartment as she had planned and moved in, renting out the studio. At this point, Vanessa was already in her first year of college. Maria continued to meet regularly with her eldest daughter. Her plan was to get Evelyn to sign the apartment over to Vanessa. Why would I give my apartment to Vanessa? I didn't see what Evelyn had to do with it. But you two are friends. She's your little sister, you know, she's your younger sister. Maria's older daughter. That's selfish of you. I inherited the apartment from my father. Vanessa has her own father, so let him worry about his daughter's future. Evelyn, well, you know very well that Mark can't offer her anything, her mother persuaded her. But seeing that Evelyn was adamant, she went for broke. And to be fair, the apartment is also mine, so I'm also an heiress and have a share in it. I did, agreed the daughter, until she sold it to her grandparents, and their will was, "Do you like it or not? And I will not violate it." "Yes, Mother, you certainly are." Mark was indignant. "You can't even reason with your own daughter. What can I do?" "It's all according to the law," answered Maria. "Both apartments she inherited. I'm powerless. And what does the law have to do with it? When it's about family," the man insisted. "Where does she need so many apartments? Is she going to salt them or what? Why couldn't she live in a one-room apartment? She could have given her sister a two-bedroom. Especially since Vanessa is getting married. Kids will be here soon. Where can we fit everything in here? I, for one, don't want to share an apartment with a strange man." "Well, your suggestions. I've talked to Evelyn many times, but she just keeps saying what's mine, and that's it. So we'll just have to play it cool if she won't take the easy way out." Mark suggested it. "She's renting out a one-bedroom, and she doesn't care who she rents it to. So she should rent it to Vanessa. What difference does that make?" Maria didn't understand. "Evelyn wouldn't charge her own sister. Her conscience won't allow it," the mayor explained. "And if her conscience allows it, then in a couple of months we'll say there's no money. Yum family so-and-so. Evelyn will not throw Vanessa out on the street." Maria thought for a moment. Her husband was right about some things, but the whole situation was a mess. It didn't seem right. The wife hesitated. Of course it was. And when one of the sisters is bursting with wealth and the other is starving, is that right? When Vanessa came home from school, her father decided to talk to her. "Daughter, Mom and I consulted and came to the conclusion that it is wrong when one sister has everything and the other has nothing." "I'm referring to Evelyn's apartments now," Mark explained. "She'd inherited them from her father." The girl reminded him, "I don't have a claim on her." "Maybe you don't, but I do," the father said irritably. "Greed and selfishness must be cut off at the root. What do you want?" "I don't understand you," Vanessa asked, and the father laid out his cunning plan to his daughter. Vanessa listened carefully and turned to her mother. "You agree with him?" Maria is not sure. She shrugged her shoulders and then answered, "But you have to live somewhere. Your James is a country boy. You can't live in a dormitory, and renting is expensive. You can't afford it. It's better than all of us living here. So you've decided to take one of Evelyn's apartments. I'll find the words. I'll put Maria's daughter in her place. We're talking about your sister." "Exactly. And from the outside, it looks like she's our blood enemy," Vanessa retorted. "Mom, Evelyn, your own daughter, is just like me. She's been through enough in her life. She's basically an orphan with her mother alive. I wouldn't wish that on her. And now you want to take away the last thing she has. What are you talking about?" Maria was outraged. "Yes, my father and I care about your future. And I think my father's plan is a good one. Didn't your father try to start doing something and earn his daughter a place to live? Has that idea ever occurred to you? I see Dad talks a lot, but he doesn't do anything. I didn't expect you to be so mean," said Vanessa and ran out of the house. She slowly took the street and pondered on what had happened. Vanessa loved her older sister, and sometimes she didn't understand why her mother was so cold to her. What could be so wrong with the child to kick her out to live with her grandparents? Didn't her mother miss her? Didn't understand that her behavior only increased the gap between them? Many questions arose in Vanessa's mind. She walked without making out the road, and when she raised her head and looked around, she realized that she was standing in front of the center where Evelyn Vasilieva worked. Had been here a couple of times, but then she hadn't paid any attention at all to the visitors to this establishment. Today, as she was walking up to her sister's office, she was met by several women. They were all different in age and status, and in appearance, but there was one thing they had in common. In each one's eyes had a deep sadness, to say the least, a detachment. They'd probably lacked love too, Vanessa suggested. Sis heard. Suddenly, she heard Evelyn's voice behind her. "What are you doing here?" Inviting her guest's office, Evelyn poured tea and sat down next to her sister. "Are you sad?" she remarked. "Did something happen with James? Did you have a fight or something with Mom?" "No," They're fine, Vanessa reassured her sister. A more expectant look came over her, but the girl remained silent, hesitant to speak. There was a feeling that she regretted her coming. Evelyn did not insist on speaking. She silently drank tea and occasionally glanced at her sister. "Olga, do you love your mother?" Suddenly Vanessa asked. "What a question, of course," without thinking, answered the older sister. "And why did you ask about it?" "Well, because I always wondered why she treats us differently," the girl confessed. "At one time I even thought that you were not her own. She's always neglected you." "Why? I don't know why you're bringing this up all of a sudden." Evelyn smiled. "But I just thought if I had 2 children I would love one less too." But Vanessa smiled at Evelyn and hugged the girl. "It's wedding jitters. All mothers love their children equally, and you will love both. So why are we treated so differently?" Vanessa wouldn't give up. "I've often wondered about that too," Evelyn admitted. "But I think my mother resents my father for leaving her alone with a baby in her arms." She shared her assumption. "Well, that's silly. First of all, how can you take offense at a dead person? And secondly, what did the child have to do with it?" The girls drank their tea in silence, each thinking about something else. Finally, Evelyn stood up, cleared the table, and sat down next to her sister, took her hand and said, "It will be different for you. Do you and Serioza love each other? And children will be born. You will love them. And Mom." Evelyn was silent for a few seconds and added, "Mama is just an unhappy woman. She should be understood and pitied. After her first marriage, she was left a young widow, and her second husband turned out to be a loser and an Alfonso." "Yes, I understand everything," Vanessa replied. "I love my dad, but he really, all his life, lives at Mom's expense. One thing I don't understand is why she put up with all this for so many years. Does she really love him? She's probably driven by fear. She's afraid of being alone," said Evelyn. "But she won't be alone, and we're being childish," said Vanessa. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and a middle-aged woman came in. "Evelyn, we need you." She disappeared as suddenly as she had appeared. "I have to go." Evelyn got up from her chair and walked over to her sister. "It was good to see you without filling your bright head with bad thoughts. You're going to be fine, and I'll always be here for you. And if you need anything, I'll be there for you." "I never thought that my daughter was so selfish." Maria expressed her displeasure when Evelyn once again refused to give one of the apartments to her younger sister. "But I guess I should have raised her better." Evelyn smirked. "And the grandparents, I see, didn't do it at all," surprised the mother. "They did, but they did it as they saw fit. And you have no right to judge them. They replaced my family, not you." Maria didn't like that kind of talk. She couldn't take criticism of herself, especially about her daughter. It probably hurt her that Evelyn was telling the truth, and Maria felt deep down guilty about her older daughter. Vanessa was preparing for the wedding. The date had already been set, invitations sent out and rings bought. But when Evelyn was offered the position of manager of the new branch of the Center for People in Difficult Situations, she hesitated. "But I'd have to move to another city. I can't leave everything now, and there's a lot to leave." The director wondered, "What or who's stopping you?" "It's not that." Evelyn was embarrassed. "It's just that my little sister is getting married soon." "That's fine. You'll take a walk and go." She offered to fix up the branch. "Come back here in a couple years and take my place." Evelyn had no more arguments to refuse. The colleague who rented her apartment had also moved to another city. So Evelyn, knowing that the newlyweds had nowhere to live, offered them a one-room apartment. For the time being, until they solved the issue of their own housing. Vasilieva was overly grateful to her sister, and the stepfather was dissatisfied. And he didn't hide it. "You could have offered a 2-bedroom, he grumbled. After leaving, Vanessa often called Evelyn and shared the latest news. One day, she blurted out that her mother was on sick leave. Something had Evelyn seriously worried. There was silence on the phone for a while. And then Vanessa laughed and said, "Don't worry, it's nothing." And after the conversation, Evelyn couldn't find room for worry. She felt that Vanessa was not telling her the whole story. Then Evelyn decided to call her mom. Maria didn't answer right away, but when she picked up the phone and heard the voice of her eldest daughter, she could hear that she was genuinely happy. She surprised her daughter. Vanessa said that you are on sick leave. Oh, under the ball also cheerfully answered the mother. A couple of sneezes, and she has already panicked. Mom, is it something serious? Don't worry, I'm fine. Why don't you tell me what's new with you? When do you plan to come back? Not for a while. The work here is just getting better. I don't think we'll be fully operational until 6 months from now. Mark got a job. Well, he's been moonlighting here and there. Maria was floundering. I see. So he didn't get a job. Oh, daughter, I have to go. My mother was in an unexpected hurry. Sorry, not missing, she said and quickly hung up the phone. Evelyn listened to the short beeps for a while longer and looked at the cell phone, not understanding anything. This conversation seemed strange to her. Usually her mother was always dissatisfied, but here she was chirping cheerfully. 6 months flew by for Evelyn like a day, and the work in the branch was established. After the inspection, the bosses were not stingy with compliments. Evelyn was proud of you and her team. On top of that, she had a man in her life. They met Nick at the center. He worked as an ambulance doctor and once came to a call. He saw an elderly woman who had been beaten up. She refused to be hospitalized, but she was too scared to stay at home. Do you think this is the first time he's beaten me? She confessed to the doctor. I'm used to both of them. But this is the first time I've seen him this angry. Maybe the doctor suggested the police. Oh, no. What are you doing? The woman was scared. He'll do time and come back. Then I'll be dead for sure. So why are you with him? The man didn't understand. Where to go? No children, no family, no friends. This Herod took everyone away. Nick felt genuinely sorry for the old woman, and he suggested that she go to the new center for helping people. Not immediately, but still she agreed. Nick drove her himself and put her in Evelyn's hands. And then several more times he stopped by the center and was interested in the well-being of his ward. The young people's working relationship quickly turned into sympathy. A month after their first meeting, Nick introduced Evelyn to his parents. Despite the fact that Nick and Evelyn were almost the same age, his parents were quite old, intelligent, courteous, pleasant to be around. They reminded Evelyn of his grandparents, and from that day on, she became a frequent visitor to their house. When are you going home? I asked Nick. Tomorrow morning. The young man's eyes immediately became sad. I'll be waiting for your return. I will quickly come to settle everything with the documents. Come back. The lovers could not part for a long time. They stood in silence and held hands. And the next day, close to lunchtime, Evelyn already reached home. Closing the door behind her, she gloried against the wall and remembered with pleasure the happy moments of life in this apartment. When her grandparents were still alive, her memories were interrupted by the phone ringing. Yes, I'm listening, she answered. Hello, sis. Vanessa's familiar voice sounded. Are you back already? Yes, I'm home. After a little silence, Vanessa said into the phone, I didn't want to tell you this, but you're going to find out anyway. Mom's in the hospital. Let's meet her off the phone. I'm going to visit her this afternoon. You're coming with me. To settle the formalities of transferring to the hometown to be the director of the help center, Evelyn met with her sister. After much hesitation, Vanessa confessed, My dad beat up my mom. She's lying there with a concussion and 2 more broken ribs. That's not counting the bruises, contusions, and abrasions. And I'm guessing it's not the first time. Evelyn guessed. Well, yes, she'd been on sick leave a few times, so she wouldn't have to go to work with bruises. But this was her first time in the hospital. Why didn't you say anything? My mom asked me to. We filed a police report. No, that mom doesn't even want to hear about it. A nurse stopped the girls at the checkpoint. It's not allowed for 2. You go. Vanessa suggested and handed her sister a robe. When Maria saw her eldest daughter, she cried. Evelyn's heart squeezed. The always indifferent, always disgruntled, stern woman now looked like a wounded bird. Evelyn wanted to hug her, to hold her close, to pity her and promise that everything would get better. But she held back. She sat down next to her on the bed. The young woman inquired, "How are you feeling?" "Well, I'm fine now," the mother replied, wiping away her tears. "Maybe you can tell me what happened." Maria silently turned away to the window. Tears flowed from her eyes again. She was ashamed to admit to her daughter what had happened. "Mom, I can help you," Evelyn said, "but you have to want to." Maria remained silent, swallowing her tears. "Mom, why did Mark do it? He's been drinking lately." Finally, her mother spoke, and it was taking a lot of money. "And my salary is not much. So when I turned him down, he beat me. And this time, Mark brought his drinking buddies and I refused to set the table for them. Why do you put up with it? You could leave him and live in peace. Go to the police. Don't you want to tell me you love him?" "I'm afraid of him," Maria confessed. "I'm very afraid of him. He will never leave me alone." "Let's make a report to the police first," suggested Evelyn. "No. What are you afraid of, Maria? You can't even imagine how this will end. What can he do? Have you forgotten where I work? And Mom, I listen to stories like this every day, and I know for a fact that if you sit back and take it, nothing good will come of it. Either we get him out of your life, or I'm leaving, and I'm never going to help you with this again." Maria thought for a moment, and then whispered, "Okay, I'll do as you say." Upon learning of the statement, Mark came to his wife to confess. He swore and swore that it would never happen again, that he would work and stop drinking. But Maria, on the advice of her daughter, was adamant. After his wife's refusal, Mark instantly became furious. Losing control of himself, he began to shout and threaten to kick her out of the house. The guards chased the man out of the hospital and, at Evelyn's request, informed her of the incident. In the evening, she went to her stepfather's house after hearing all of his threats against her. Evelyn pulled out her phone and turned on the voice recorder, which was perfectly audible. "I'll pass this on." In a calm tone of voice, she said, "And if you try to carry out any of your threats, you'll go to jail for a long time. I've made sure of that. What do you want?" Mark asked when he realized he was trapped. "Mom's being discharged soon," Evelyn replied. "She needs to rest. That's why you have 3 days to move out." "Yeah, sure," grinned the stepmother. "Look for the fool. I'm as much the boss here as she is." "You forgot about Vanessa and me," Evelyn replied. "You don't seem to care enough. So you've got 2 apartments. None of your business. You had nothing to do with my apartment or this one. You didn't put a dime into it. What's the difference? It's the law. The laws I know. It's jointly acquired property and will be divided equally. That's if you don't get locked up before you divide it." Evelyn smiled. "What do you want from me?" Peace March asked again. "You get out of here, and Mom will take a statement from the police. But I have nowhere to go," Evelyn said, very confused. "As far as I know, you have a lot of friends." "Igor first, Evelyn. Ask them if they'll take you in." In the end, Evelyn, together with a lawyer from the help center, helped her mother divorce Mark and kick him out of the apartment. He spent a long time looking for arguments in his favor, but his stepdaughter's threats to put him in jail were more convincing. Having collected his things, he left on his return home. Maria took a long time to get used to the fact that she was the only one who owned the place. She also needed psychological counseling, and more than one to get away from the stress. Evelyn helped her mother as much as she could. It seemed to her that during this period they had become closer than they had been in their entire lives. Her mother was genuinely happy every time her daughters came to visit. And soon Vanessa announced that she too would soon become a mother. And Maria was worried about her studies. "It's no big deal. I'll take a leave of absence," in the hustle and bustle of daily life. Evelyn never got around to telling her family about Nick, despite the fact that they chatted at length on the phone every day. The man was looking forward to seeing them, but he wasn't being let go from his job, as there was a staff shortage. Evelyn had not been able to make it. "Well, I can't leave my mom right now. She hasn't fully come to her senses yet," she explained. Then one day Maria invited her eldest daughter for a walk. Lately they often walked together, discussing the news. Talking about distracted topics, Maria said, "Olga, I thought long and hard and came to the conclusion that I want to give Vanessa my apartment. After all, she and James are going to have a baby soon. They just need a permanent place to live." "Yeah, it's your apartment. Then you can do whatever you want with it," her daughter agreed. Evelyn wasn't going to claim her mother's place, but she felt bad that her mother didn't even think about it. Well, just for decency's sake. After all, she had her share of the apartment. "Yes, you're right," nodded her mother. "Vanessa will probably be pleased. But you know what I don't really want." Evelyn looked at her mother questioningly. "I don't want to be a free appendix in this apartment." "What do you mean by that?" The daughter didn't understand. "A young family should live separately," Maria explained. "Maybe I can live in your apartment." Evelyn was not surprised by her mother's question. Perhaps she had expected it and was somewhat upset. It seemed to Evelyn that her mother had fully realized her mistakes and was doing her best to correct them. But as soon as she recovered from the divorce, she was back to her old ways. Under different circumstances, Evelyn probably would have given her mother permission. But now her resentment for her spoiled childhood, for her mother's lack of love and affection, flared up in her with renewed vigor. She turned away so that her mother would not see her weakness and said, "I'm sorry, but I have other plans for my apartments. I need them." "What other plans?" I got angry. "Maria, you wouldn't dare leave your mother on the street. I dare to remind, not long ago, I already helped you not to stay on the street," answered Evelyn, turning around and looking into her mother's eyes. "And I did everything possible and impossible then. And if today you've got it in your head to give the apartment to someone else, I don't hold it against you. That's your right. But it's not my fault." "Well, first of all, it wasn't someone. It was your sister, Maria. And secondly, I didn't ask for help. You're the one who got involved with Mark. You're the one who pushed for our divorce and then kicked him out." Evelyn was horrified by those words. All her phantom hopes for their rapprochement and warming relationship had crumbled like a house of cards. She wanted to scream and cry herself to tears. But Evelyn, clenching her will into a fist, calmly said, "I thought you didn't mind getting rid of that drunkard and tyrant who asked you to think at all." The mother parried. "Before you came here, I had a husband who loved me and beat me out of love, I suppose," added Evelyn. "Yes, there were disagreements between us, but like everyone else." Ignoring her daughter's words, Evelyn continued, "How would you really know? You don't have a family." Her mother's last sentence caused Evelyn great heartache. Like a hurt little girl, she wanted to hurt her abuser too. "So whose credit is it that I didn't have a family?" she shouted out, barely holding back the tears that were choking her. "My family is my grandparents. It was they who showed me what it should be without humiliation, without scandals and manhandling, where people love, respect, and appreciate each other." After listening to her daughter, the mother cooled down a bit. She tried to justify herself. It came out rather awkwardly. The woman was either reading something, but Evelyn couldn't hear her. "While I believed I was helping you get rid of a tyrant husband, you've been plotting to get your hands on my inheritance," she suggested. "And you know what I'm gonna tell you. Mommy, I have a fiancé. His name is Nick, and he's an EMT. We're getting married soon. He's got a job in DC, and I'm gonna transfer to his new branch of the Metropolitan Care Center. And if everything works out, we'll sell these apartments to buy one in DC. Any other questions for me?" Maria stood with a confused look and didn't know what to say to her daughter. She just remained silent, looking at her and batting her eyelashes, and all we could say was, "We're going to stay here." "Are we staying here?" "Yes. Imagine, We each have our own lives. Evelyn answered and turned around and walked away from her mother. And the next morning at exactly 6:00 a.m., her cell phone was ringing off the hook. Evelyn, I understand your mother correctly. You decided to kick us out on the street. Territory. Little sister into the phone. What are you talking about? Me. I don't understand, Evelyn clarified. I didn't quite understand exactly what she was talking about. My mom told me, Vanessa replied, that you're moving to Washington and selling all your apartments. That's true. Well, most likely, Evelyn agreed, gradually moving away from the basics. When were you planning to tell me? Suddenly shouted Vanessa. You know my situation. I'm not allowed to be nervous or anxious. And you didn't even deign to inform me that Serioja and I would soon be homeless. I think you're being a little dramatic. Sis. Evelyn tried to calm her down. Sis. Vanessa asked her again. Yeah, a real sister wouldn't do something like that. You know very well that we have no place to live. First you invited us here, and now you want to send us away like dogs. What about selling the apartment? Don't you think that's despicable? Evelyn was finally waking up to her sister's attacks. She was uncomfortable with the tone in which Vanessa was speaking to her. I take it this is in lieu of a thank you, she clarified. I'd like to remind you that I called you in temporarily, not permanently. You and James wanted a loan. Isn't that right? I just wanted you to keep your rent down. What mortgage are you talking about? Was Vanessa nervous? Yeah, we're struggling to make ends meet. James has time to study and work, but his salary leaves a lot to be desired. We can't even go to the movies, let alone make a big purchase. But I guess you'll have to move in with your mom. Evelyn suggested it. I don't think she'd mind. I'm sure she would. And Vanessa said, unlike you, my mom doesn't spare anything for me. She wanted to give me her apartment, but you ruined it. And how did she do that? Let me ask you something. Your selfishness. Vanessa was going, and she couldn't stop. You've been spoiled since you were a kid. You're used to everyone dancing around you. You want to study, get an apartment. You want an apartment for another one. And how do other people cope? Didn't you care? Evelyn, listening to her sister, couldn't stop wondering if her mother was so acutely ill. Vanessa couldn't have changed so much. After all, for so many years she had been an attentive, loving sister. What happened? Pretending. Thoughts swarmed through her head. Evelyn listened to the profanity and tears streamed down her cheeks. Everything she believed in and aspired to was crumbling before her eyes. The people who were closest to her had betrayed her once again. Evelyn had no desire to prove or explain anything. Taking a deep breath, she wiped away her tears and said in as calm a tone as possible, I'm sorry, sister, that I'm not what you wanted me to be, but mine will continue to be mine. And yours? Yours? And she immediately dropped the call. The clock read 600 am. There was a ringing silence. The city was slowly waking up. Evelyn kept replaying Vanessa's words in her head. Everything swam before her eyes, and she wanted to scream, but her strength was gone. Tears streamed down her face, and her heart was beating as hard as if it wanted to jump out of her chest. Evelyn was pulled out of her daze by the phone ringing. The name Nick popped up on the screen. Shaking her head, and to bring herself to her senses, she answered the call. Good morning, beloved. The young man said cheerfully hello. I hope I didn't wake you up. I have some good news. Good morning to you too, Nick, Evelyn replied, trying not to show her distressed state. I'm awake now. Did something happen to you? You've been crying. No, I'm fine. Just a little cold. But it's really bad timing. Nick lamented, and I finally settled on a transfer. He starts his new assignment in a week. I wanted to see you. You're welcome to come. I'd love to. Well, then I'll pack all my things not to return and come to you, said Nick. And you don't shell out. Drink tea with raspberries. Believe me, I'll be as good as new by the time you arrive. 2 days later, she met Nick at the train station. The man was glowing in part. Dropping his suitcase, he ran up to Evelyn. and taking her in his arms, began circling her in place. "At last we are together," he rejoiced. Every day Nick brought his favorite breakfast in bed and greeted her with a hot dinner from work. While Evelyn was away, he fixed the faucets that had long been poking up, changed the hinges in the kitchen cabinets, hung the portrait of her with her grandparents that had been on the table for several years, sent against the wall. In short, redid all the man's chores. In the presence of Nick, Evelyn felt happy and loved. The week flew by like a single day. On the eve of departure, Nick and Evelyn took a day off. In the morning, the lovers did not live in bed for a long time. And then, while the young man went to the train station for tickets, the hostess prepared a delicious lunch. Having bolstered life, they decided to take a walk around the city. Holding hands like schoolchildren, Nick and Evelyn slowly shaved through the park, enjoying the fresh, frosty air. They were warm and cozy with each other. The time flew by. Nick invited Evelyn to the restaurant for dinner. A glass of wine, light appetizers, romantic ambience, quiet, peaceful music. Everything contributed to making this an unforgettable evening. Nick took Evelyn's hand and looked intently into her eyes. "Will you marry me?" Suddenly he asked, and taking advantage of the girl's interference, pulled a ring box out of his pocket. At that moment, Evelyn's heart was ready to jump out of her chest. She had been waiting for Nick's marriage proposal for a long time and was ready to accept it. But she had no idea that this moment would be so exciting for her. She happily replied and extended her hand to the young man. Soon Nick left for the capital, and Evelyn stayed in her city to wait for a transfer to another branch. Having seen off her fiancé, she plunged headlong into work. Being preoccupied with other people's problems, the woman forgot about her own. Firmly decided for himself not to dig into the past and leave in relations with his mother and sister, everything as it is, she calmed down and got on with her life, accepting the marriage proposal. Evelyn asked Nick to dispense with the lavish celebrations. The bride and groom agreed to get married at a Washington, D.C. registry office after Evelyn's relocation was resolved. By that time, Nick promised to settle the question of rent. Spring was in full swing. Nature was leaving its winter hibernation, and the riot of colors around created a joyful mood. The Gulf, birds singing on different voices, made hearts flutter. To top it all off, Evelyn was waiting for her transfer to Washington, and she couldn't wait to see her beloved. Nick, as promised, prepared everything for the bride's arrival. He rented an apartment for the first time, adjusted the household, studied the real estate market. And so the long-awaited day came. Evelyn gathered all the things necessary for the first time. She made an agreement with a realtor about selling her apartment and set out for a new life. All along the way, she thought about the last conversation she'd had with her mother and sister. "You are a bad daughter," showered her mother with accusations ungrateful. "I gave you life. How could I take care of you? Yeah, you went to live with your grandparents. But that was your decision, and I didn't kick you out. It's not my fault you couldn't get along with Mark. I didn't have to be alone for the rest of my life because of you. I was too young when I was widowed, and I needed a man. And you know, not everyone would take in a child, and Mark took you in. And you kicked him out of the house. You always made sure I was lonely because you're selfish. I don't think anyone needs him but you," Evelyn replied. "If he whistles, he'll come running. You have no right to insult him. He's my father." Vanessa stood up for him. "I've always loved you and respected you as a big sister. You've been my role model. But I didn't think any apartment would come between us. Nor did I expect the price of your love to be an apartment," Evelyn argued. "You're ungrateful." Vanessa echoed her mother's accusations. "For you, material things were more important than family ties." "That's not true," Evelyn replied. "I never stopped loving you. But you, when you learned that there would be no division of my inheritance, quickly abandoned me." Maria and Vanessa proved Evelyn and her wrong for a long time, trying to press on pity and conscience. But their arguments did not work on Evelyn, giving them a chance to speak. She walked away with the words, "I will not allow myself to be manipulated, but I think the grandparents foresaw this situation, so they disposed of their property this way and not the other way around. If you can't be happy for me along with me, I won't bother your eyes and will leave. I don't want anything from you, but I don't owe you anything either. Do you have a husband?" She turned to her sister, "So earn your own apartment, and if you can't, ask your father for help." In a new place, Evelyn settled in quickly. The team was new and young. There was a lot of active work, but Evelyn always got home on time. She gave herself the attitude that family was the most important thing in her life. The appointed date of the first day of summer Nick and Evelyn signed. As agreed, they did not invite guests to their first family party, deciding that it was just for the two of them. It was Maria and Vanessa, and still there was no word. But the realtor found buyers for the apartments to resolve the sale. She took 2 weeks of unpaid leave and went to her hometown to settle the formalities. Evelyn was about to return, but before leaving she decided to visit her relatives. Approaching her mother's house, she saw her sitting on a bench in the yard. It had only been 6 months since they had last seen each other, but it seemed to Evelyn that she had aged a lot in that time. Maria sat alone and concentrated, staring at one point in front of her. Sadness and longing were imprinted on her face, barely noticeable. The wrinkles before had become deep. At the sight of Evelyn's mother, everything squeezed inside. In that moment, she wanted to hug her and feel sorry for her, maybe even apologize for what she'd said in the heat of the moment. On impulse, Evelyn rushed to her mother's side. But at that moment, Mark came out of the driveway. When she saw him, she quickly got up and followed. Evelyn stopped, seeing off her mother and stepfather. She experienced a gamut of feelings, pain from another betrayal, anger, self-pity. Barely holding back tears, she turned and ran back. But at that moment, she heard a familiar voice calling her. "Evelyn, it's you." The girl stopped and, turning her head, saw her sister with a bag in her hands. And despite her exhausted rhythm, she looked more beautiful. Pregnancy was in her face, flipping from foot to foot. As Vanessa jokingly approached Evelyn, "How long ago did this arrive?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. 2 weeks ago. It's a long time. I'm leaving today, and I've come to take care of some business." Vanessa was silent, trying to formulate a question. "Yes, I just wanted to stop by and say goodbye before I left," Evelyn explained. "But no one was home. You must have missed your mom," Vanessa suggested. She was getting ready. The girl was silent again, clearly not saying the right thing. "To leave. Is everything all right?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Then I'll go," Evelyn said and turned around. "Why don't you come over for a visit?" Vanessa asked in an uncertain tone. "Not tonight. Some other time," Evelyn promised, and started to go on her way. But her sister called out to her again. Evelyn turned around and saw Vanessa's guilty face. "Evelyn," she addressed her sister as before, "I'm sorry for what I said to you the other day. You know, hormones. Don't hold it against me. I don't know what came over me, but you're right. I had nothing to do with your inheritance. You're the only heir to your dad and his parents. Yeah, I wasn't so lucky with my dad. He never thought about me. He's lived his whole life and continues to live only for himself. What did my mom see in him?" "Don't worry," Evelyn reassured her. "I'm not mad at you. I understand. Everyone can make mistakes. The main thing is to realize it in time and repent." Evelyn walked over to Vanessa and hugged her, pulling her close to her sister. She felt a push in her stomach and bounced away. Vasilieva smiled and put a hand on her tummy and said, "Well, they're from the tribe," and met. The girls both laughed. After the conversation with her sister, Evelyn felt as if a mountain had fallen from her shoulders. The only thing that kept her thinking was, had her mother really gotten back together with Mark? Had she forgiven him? Evelyn hesitated to ask Vanessa. She was afraid to break the fragile peace that had formed between them during their last meeting. "Why would you even want that information?" "I don't understand," Nick also asked. If your mom is fine with it, then you shouldn't even care. You know, Nick, whatever she is, she's my mother, and I can't live with that monster around. Evelyn justified herself. What if he hits her again? But you can't stop your mother from talking to him. It's her choice. You're right, I agree. Evelyn, sighing heavily. And then there's your sister. I don't think she'll let you hurt her mother, Nick said before leaving. Then, turning the key in the lock, he kissed his wife on the cheek and disappeared out the door. Evelyn thought about it for a while longer, but gradually everyday tasks distracted her from the bad thoughts. She plunged headlong into her work. On weekends, the newlyweds traveled from morning to evening to look at apartments. They decided not to hurry with the choice, especially since Nick's apartment was not for sale. On the secondary market, nothing suitable for our money. Disappointed, said Evelyn, returning from another viewing. Maybe we should look at new buildings, Nick suggested. They have lower prices. Yes, but we don't know when the house will be finished, and then we'll have to make repairs. You need a lot of money for that too. So it's better to make repairs again than to redo them. With optimism in his voice, said Nick. The next weekend it was decided to look at apartments in houses under construction. After waiting for the end of the work week, the couple were going to the construction company when Evelyn's phone rang. Hi, sis. She said hello cheerfully, answering the call. However, James' voice came out of the receiver. Evelyn, it's not Vanessa, he said. It's James. Something's happened. Evelyn immediately worried. No, don't worry. I said, I'm just calling to let you know you've become an aunt. Our daughter Vanessa was born while she's sleeping, so I thought I'd let you know. Congratulations, shouted Evelyn happily. And maybe you can come visit us too, James asked. I can't yet at work, she explained. But I'll try to come by New Year's Eve, just as my niece will grow up and get stronger by then. After saying goodbye to her sister's husband, Evelyn told Nick the good news, but she noticed that he reacted a little too calmly, even indifferently. I realize that they're strangers to you, of course, but you could have been happy for me. With resentment in her voice, Evelyn expressed her displeasure. I'm glad, Nick replied. It's just that I think it's time for me to meet your family. It just doesn't seem like the right thing to do. We've been married for 3 months, and your mother and sister still don't know. Yeah, you're right about that. But you know how complicated my relationship with them is. Evelyn tried to justify herself. But I promised to make it up to them. We'll go there together in the winter. I'll look at some more apartments in new buildings. The newlyweds chose one. The most like the new neighborhood and all the necessary infrastructure. Constructed yards are arranged for recreation for children and adults. Listed Evelyn. Pluses of this object. Even the metro station is planned to open in walking distance, and a large selection of apartments with different layouts and on different floors, added Nick. And from the window you can see a small pond. Evelyn perked up. I like everything, and the price. The price is reasonable for us. Nick. Yes. But if my apartment was sold, we could buy a 2-bedroom in this house. Nick was disappointed. You know, the important thing is to start somewhere. His wife encouraged him. I've got enough money for a 1-bedroom. It's better than renting. Well, yes, you're right. The husband agreed, but his tone was still upset. But don't get me wrong. I've never lived off a woman. And now I do not want you to think that I need your apartment. What kind of nonsense is that? Evelyn was indignant. You and I are husband and wife. It's not nonsense. Nick continued. This question is very important to me. What are you trying to tell me? I just think that if you happen to be buying this apartment, you should have it registered in your name. What's more, I'm proposing a prenuptial agreement. Evelyn looked at her husband, trying to understand whether he was serious or joking. But there was not a muscle on Nick's face. He was determined. Well, all right, she agreed. If you insist. Yes, I want my woman to be sure of me at all times. I love you, my knights, Evelyn said with a smile and hugged her husband. Congratulations to you, Evelyn, said the representative of the man in suit and tie, handing the new keys to the same person. "You are now the full owner of a one-bedroom apartment with finishes. Thank you," replied Evelyn, and not hiding joy, looked at the people standing on the playground of future neighbors. Keys in a solemn atmosphere handed to all present owners of apartments. Then on the same playground, the developer organized a small amateur concert. And in the evening, Evelyn and Nick happy returned home and discussed their move to a new apartment. During the conversation, they didn't immediately hear the phone ringing from Nick's jacket pocket, but the caller was persistent. Looking at the screen and seeing an unfamiliar number, Nick was surprised and answered the call. "Hello. Yes, this is me selling. I'll be able to drive up next weekend." "Yeah, okay, you got a deal," and dropped the call. Nick grumbled unhappily. About time. Had there really been a buyer for the apartment? Evelyn guessed. "I think I'm the only one who's found one. What are we going to do with him now? We could have bought that bigger apartment a month earlier, and now we can't sell the new one. Why don't we just not sell your apartment yet?" Evelyn suggested it. "Let it stand." "No, I don't think so. We'll be looking for a buyer for 6 months. As long as there's someone willing to buy it, we have to see it through. The boss is the boss," shrugged his shoulders, replied Evelyn. And the next weekend, Nick went to his city, and Evelyn, not knowing what to do, walked from corner to corner. And then the phone rang. "Hi," Sis said hello to Evelyn, answering the call. "Hi, Evelyn," said Vanessa, without much joy in her voice. "What's up? What are you doing?" "Yes? I'm thinking about moving to a new apartment. Why are you so sad? Did something happen? I don't know where to start. I got stuck. My sister, Mom, and Dad. Anyway, they're back together. I don't want him to come home. We're too cramped as it is. Dad got a house in the country from his parents, but Mom doesn't want to leave town. Why don't you talk to her?" "Oh no, I'm not getting involved in your business. I've already given up my share of the apartment. We'll take it from here." "Evelyn, what about you? You're definitely not going to claim it?" Vanessa asked. "No, I'm not." "Thanks, sis, you're better than that." With all matters settled in his hometown, Nick returned home satisfied and said to Evelyn, "I propose to buy a plot of land in the suburbs and gradually build a summer house. What do you think about it?" "I think it's a very good idea." Surprisingly, such a plot of land was found very quickly, and on New Year's Eve, the happy newlyweds went to visit Vanessa and Sergei. Hospitable, the hosts gladly painted the gifts brought by her sister and her husband. Evelyn was getting acquainted with her niece, and Vanessa was jokingly indignant. Here was my sister getting married and not even telling anyone. And when the first passions subsided, Evelyn asked, "Where's Mom?" "She moved in with her father," Vanessa answered dryly. The older sister did not pursue the subject further. The New Year's Eve party turned out to be fun. James and Nick. Despite the difference in age, they quickly found a common language. And on the eve of returning home, Evelyn asked her sister, "Have you seen your mom for a long time?" "I haven't seen her since she moved," Vanessa answered, and added that if she doesn't call her, it means she's doing well. Evelyn was a little surprised by her sister's answer, but she remained silent. On the day of the guest's departure, Vanessa received a call from her mother. "Daughter, can I come to you?" Swallowing tears, she asked, "What happened?" "Father, I guess I was wrong to contact him again." "Yes, come over, of course," Vanessa invited in a disgruntled tone. "But only in your former room. Our bedrooms now." "Oh, thank you, Vanessa Sushko," rejoiced mother, not paying attention to the warning. "I'm already near the house. I'll be right in." A minute later, the doorbell rang. On the threshold stood the mother, and seeing the eldest daughter, she fussed, and fixing with her hand the hair that was under the cap, thus covering her eye, said hello. Evelyn noticed a bruise on her mother's face, carefully covered with total cream. "Happy holidays, Mom," Evelyn said, hesitating to go up to her and hug her. "Meet my husband, Nick. And this is my mom." Maria introduced herself and extended her hand to her son-in-law. "I didn't expect you to marry such a handsome man," she said to her daughter. "But why do you have a beautiful daughter, smart and handsome?" "Yes, she got that from me," Maria said coquettishly. "Oh, why are we standing at the threshold? Why don't we sit down and celebrate?" "No, we should get back," said Evelyn. "It was nice to see you. Come visit. Vanessa invited us. Would you like to come?" Nick replied. After the meeting with Evelyn's mother, she felt bad. All the way she was silent. Understanding his wife's mood, Nick did not bother her. And later, from a phone conversation with her sister, Evelyn learned that contacted her father, Alina, addicted to alcohol. And as soon as they get drunk, they start to find out about each other. Vanessa complained. Scolding turns into fighting. "That's why I didn't want my father to move back in. Why didn't you tell me before?" Evelyn asked. "What difference would it have made? Evelyn, you already helped Mom out once. Where's the gratitude? She blames you even more for ruining her family." Evelyn was hurt to hear those words, but she was used to her mother's attitude. "I persuaded her to stay, but she decided to go back to her father," Vanessa continued. "And when I forbade him to cross the threshold of our house, she signed the apartment over to me in solidarity with him and slammed the door loudly. As you could see, their relationship lasted a little over a month. And now she's living with you." "No. A week after you left, her father came for her and persuaded her to come back to him without her realizing it," Evelyn said with genuine regret. "Why should she be so nervous in her old age? Maybe she needs medical attention." "No, I don't think so. I don't think she'd want medical attention." 5 years have passed since then. The sisters still called each other, occasionally visiting. Nick and Evelyn gradually built a house, a sauna, and a gazebo on their country estate. "Our country house is not for work, but for relaxation," Evelyn said. And indeed, on every holiday, and just on weekends, they often went out of town, inviting friends to visit. Once, after a telephone conversation with his mother, Nick asked his wife Evelyn, "Would you mind if I brought my parents to our country house? They're in poor health. They'll be closer to us here." "Evelyn, since the day I met her, I've had a great relationship with my mother-in-law and mother-in-law. That's why she immediately agreed to her husband's proposal. And on the next weekend, the spouses went to Nick's parents and offered them to move into their house. But what about our apartment?" Mother hesitated. "And what will happen to her?" asked Nick. "Let it stand she does not ask for bread." After a little thought, the parents agreed. And soon they were already living at the dacha of their son and daughter-in-law and rejoiced that now they had the opportunity to spend more time in the fresh air. Evelyn was pleased to see the old people happy. She loved secrets with her mother-in-law, as she had once done as a child with her grandmother. Nick's mother was an intelligent woman and tried to stay out of their lives. But there was one question she couldn't stop asking. "Evelyn, why don't you and Nick have children?" she asked one day. "I'd like to have grandchildren in my old age." It was a question that had been on her mind for years. She and her husband dreamed of having children. They examined different doctors, took prescribed medications, but everything was useless. Everyone said, "You're both healthy. Maybe there's an incompatibility between you." And no one could tell you what to do about it. Evelyn had given up hope of becoming a mother. And once in a conversation with her husband, she even suggested that he break up with her and find another woman who could bear him a child. But Nick was outraged when he heard about it. "Never, you hear, never suggesting that I break up with you. I love you and I wouldn't trade you for any other woman. If God doesn't give us children, then we'll live together and enjoy each other's company." Evelyn and Nick never returned to the subject again. They seemed resigned to their fate. But when Evelyn heard the question of children from the people around them, from those around her, and she felt uneasy. Vanessa and Serioja had another daughter. They were happily married, but Vanessa had little contact with her mother. Evelyn, having buried Mark, who was stabbed to death by a neighbor in a drunken brawl, was left to live in his house. She asked to go to her youngest daughter's house, but Vanessa didn't want to take her in. I don't think she will be a good example for her granddaughters. The woman explained her decision. I don't want any drunkenness here. Evelyn and her husband came to Maria several times, offering to help, to fix up the house that was almost falling apart. But the mother did not accept any help from her eldest daughter. She abandoned us years ago and went to her Washington, D.C., taking all her money. So go there. She yelled at her. I don't want anything more from you. When I asked you, you didn't want to share. Now get the fuck out of here. Forget you have a mother. You're ungrateful. I raised you alone without a father, and you ruined my family. You kicked my husband out. Vanessa left you. I didn't abandon anyone. Evelyn tried to justify herself. You're the one who threw me out of your life like an unwanted kitten. After Grandma and Grandpa died, I was floundering on my own. Well, you're just going to keep on floundering. Don't mess with me. I have someone to take care of me. Vanessa has always loved me, unlike you. Yeah, that's why you live here in this shack. Out of spite, Evelyn said. It's none of your business. I can live where I want. Get out of my house, shouted after and running daughters Maria. Having become an unhappy witness of the last scandal, Nick forbade Evelyn to go to her mother. And Evelyn herself lost the last desire to visit this woman. 6 months after moving to the country house, 6 months after moving to the country house of his son, Nick's father died. The mother was very worried, but tried to hold on. After consultation, the spouses moved her to their apartment. Cramped, but not in offense, said Nick. Don't join us, said the wife. We have a one-room apartment, but it's big. Well, now that I settled in, as Mom said, why should our apartment be idle? Let's sell it and exchange it for a 2- or 3-room apartment. A year later, the couple celebrated a housewarming party in a spacious 3-room apartment. That day, the house was full of guests, Vanessa and James. With their daughters came to congratulate relatives. Friends brought a lot of gifts. The holiday was a success. Evelyn and her mother-in-law set a sumptuous table, and everyone was satisfied. And in the evening, after seeing his friends off, Nick took his relatives to the country house. They wished to stay with them for a few days. Evelyn and her mother-in-law were clearing the table when she felt very bad. Nick's frightened mother called an ambulance and called her son. By the time he returned, a doctor was already sitting near Evelyn. Seeing Nick, she said hello to him and smiled and said, "Congratulations, colleague, you're about to become a daddy. And you, mommy, do you need to take care of yourself?" She turned to Evelyn. "In the next few months, you should not have any excitement or overexertion.